Hey guys, tonight we slip past the gold trimmed gates of Topkapi Palace, not through a grand hall, but through the side path most visitors miss, under the low canopy of pomegranate trees. You're not here as a guest, you're here as a gardener. The night air is cool and spiced with jasmine. Somewhere, deep in the tiled maze of the harem, a lute strums softly. But your world is earth and roots, and right now you're crouched beside an old marble fountain, your hands deep in a bed of dark soil that once nourished emperors. This isn't just gardening. You tend the imperial tulips, the living jewels of the Ottoman Empire. And those who know their petals from their pistils also know the palace's most curious truth here. In these fragrant, whispering gardens, secrets grow like weeds. You probably won't survive this job. Not because of the shears or the sharp-tongued eunuchs, but because in Topkapi, even the flowers are watching. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter the gardens through a side arch carved with faded floral motifs. You've been summoned before dawn, which is never good news. That's when the head gardener, or Bob Bostink, walks the grounds alone, inspecting not just leaves, but loyalty. He waits for you beside a small tulip bed. Only 5 blooms, but each one rare, some imported under secret arrangements from Persia. One has a curled edge like a falcon's beak. That one, he reminds you, must never be trimmed unless the signal comes. And yes, he says, signal, not order. Welcome to the inner sanctum of Ottoman horticulture, where tulips mean power and gardeners keep secrets with their pruning hooks. The imperial gardens aren't just a pleasure zone, they're strategic. Nestled among fragrant herbs and ornamental ponds are shaded alcoves where viziers whisper treason. Garden walls are tall not just for privacy, but for eavesdropping insulation. Each path curves, just enough to hide who might be standing around the bend. Every turn in the garden, like every turn in court politics, is calculated. You pass an orange tree where, rumor says, a former sultan once hanged a rebellious gardener by his belt of woven mint leaves. Not confirmed, but the tree leans slightly to the left, as if remembering something. There's a hierarchy here, a floral pecking order. You're new, which means your job is mostly digging pits for compost, fetching water from the lion, spout fountains, and being invisible. But the real power lies in bulb management. Those who handle the tulip bulbs, rare, delicate, sometimes smuggled in ceramic vases from as far as Venice, are trusted or feared. Possibly both. It's quiet mostly. You move like a cat across dew-soaked grass. The birds aren't even up yet. But already, one of the palace concubines has tossed out a ribbon, a coded signal, depending on its color, for which tulip to display in her window. No one admits this system exists, of course. The court poets write about language of the flowers, but it's not just for poetry, it's intelligence. Pedal, based diplomacy. Historians still argue whether this flower code was ever officially sanctioned or just a popular delusion of the lovelorn and conspiratorial. But out here, watching a sultan's favorite sniff a white tulip and then frown slightly, you start to wonder what exactly she's reacting to. One of your fellow gardeners, an old man named Furhat, with only 2 fingers on his right hand, leans over as you weed the marjoram patch. If the tulip's petals face the palace wall, he murmurs, means danger. If they open wide before noon, it means betrayal. You're not sure whether to believe him or have him evaluated. But later, when you pass the same flower bed and see a crimson bloom tilting just slightly toward the harem windows, your stomach tightens. There's a fringe tale that still circulates, rarely above a whisper, that the Bob Bostink Alar, those elite head gardeners, once acted as executioners. That behind every serene arrangement of hyacinth and narcissus, someone once knelt in terror among the flowers For the final time, the gardens become more than a workplace. They become a labyrinth of meaning. A purple tulip left on the vizier's path might mean loyalty. Or poison. No one's sure anymore. And that's the point. By evening, after a long day of adjusting gravel in a pattern no one will ever notice except, possibly, the Grand Mufti. You're sore and sleepy. But the real work begins at dusk. That's when the gardeners gather not in sheds, but in the cupola of the greenhouse, an absurdly warm glass and metal chamber that smells like honey and mildew. There, under flickering oil lamps, the bulbs are sorted. Not all bulbs are equal. Some are tagged with slips of parchment. Some are anonymous. A few are warm, despite the cool stone beneath them. You're told to guard one overnight, just one bulb. Easy, right? You nestle it in a carved wooden box lined with cotton. You even hum to it a bit before you doze off. When you wake, the box is gone. So is Furhat. You blink hard in the morning haze, staring at the indentation where the box used to be. Just a smudge of cotton, a faint smell of clove oil, and the haunting echo of Furhat's lopsided humming that seemed to follow you into dreams. The bulb's disappearance isn't just suspicious. It's sacrilege. In the Ottoman palace, losing a tulip bulb, especially one tagged with the crimson wax seal of the Valide Sultan, is enough to earn you a quiet reassignment to the cypress groves, with a shovel, and no witnesses. The tulip, you're beginning to realize, is not just a flower here. It's an intelligence asset. A symbol, yes, but also a courier, a spy, a pawn in a garden game played by people in silks who've never once pruned their own rose bushes. You rush toward the greenhouse, heart jackhammering beneath your linen robe, stepping over snoring cats and strewn petals like clues at a crime scene. Inside, the air's thick with heat and worry. The Baf Bostink stands with arms crossed. He does not look at you. He looks at the box you've retrieved from the palace guard. Empty, except for a smudge of pollen in the bottom. Yellow. Not from your bulb. Someone swapped it. He doesn't yell. Instead, he hands you a small pouch. Inside, a single tulip seed. An insult, really, not even a bulb. Starting from seed means years of tending. And in the court's time scale, that's an eternity. You've been demoted, diplomatically, to the status of least useful. Tulips weren't always this dramatic. But around the turn of the 16th century, they started to turn heads, first in Persia, then sweeping into Ottoman lands like perfume through silk. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent was so obsessed, he ordered special gardens filled with just one kind of tulip. A ghostly flame, tipped variety known only by its poetic name, Vura Fak Gozaya, or Dawn's Tear. Historians still argue whether he actually bred these flowers himself or merely ordered his gardeners around while composing ghazals in a brocade robe. Either way, the message was clear: tulips meant prestige. And where prestige grows, so does paranoia. You learn the art of petal reading. Not the romantic kind, but a real system. 3 stripes down the middle. That one's for mourning. Edges curled inward. Secret meeting. Pale with a purple base. A request for poison, or possibly a date, depending on who plants it and where. You begin noticing them, like messages around the palace. A single tulip placed beside the calligrapher's chamber. Another by the harem's cistern, facing downward. You pluck that one carefully and tuck it into your sleeve, just in case. The most unnerving discovery comes one evening when you're helping the junior gardeners inventory the spice terrace. A satchel of saffron bulbs contains, at the bottom, a single tiny scroll, no bigger than your thumb, tied in silk thread. You sneak a peek. It reads simply. The Dutch envoy asks again. He will bring clove buds. You don't know who it's for or who wrote it. But suddenly, that yellow pollen in your stolen bulb box makes more sense. Dutch traders had recently begun swapping rare spices for tulip bulbs, and vice versa. A single rare tulip was worth more than gold, and in the right circles, it was worth betrayal. You think back to Furhat, missing now 2 full days. The greenhouse is quieter without his mutterings. Some say he left Others suggest he never existed, but you remember the way he spoke to the flowers as if they were old comrades. Maybe they were. You're reassigned to the night shift. A clear punishment, but also a kind of promotion. Night in the garden isn't restful. That's when secrets rise from the soil, and people who never appear by daylight come to stroll among the blooms. You hear footsteps, light and fast, behind the rose trellis. You duck, tools clattering quietly at your side. A figure in a dark robe darts toward the fountain and drops something. A slip of paper? No, a petal. Bright white. Folded twice, you wait until they leave, you unfold it. The tulip petal has writing, faint but there. The bloom in Edern cannot survive the frost. That's either a poetic weather complaint or code. You think it's code. Word spreads, quietly, that bulb thefts have increased. Not just here in Topkapi, but at the imperial gardens in Edern and Bursa. Someone's collecting them, not for beauty, but for leverage. And you can't shake the idea that Ferhat might be part of it. Or worse, was trying to stop it. One slow evening, you sneak into the old gardener's shed. Dust, broken urns, a few rusted pruning shears. You spot his ledger, tucked behind a loose brick. It's a mess of scribbled notes, sketches of tulips, and strange codes. One entry stands out. A sketch of a tulip, black petals, wide as a hand, with a center like an eye. Beneath it, only blooms in betrayal's soil. You feel the temperature drop. Later that week, a visitor arrives at the palace. A Dutch botanist, supposedly here to admire Ottoman horticulture. But his shoes are too clean, his gaze too sharp, and he takes far too long examining the security around the tulip beds. You watch him speak with the Grand Vizier near the iris grove. They both smile. But the next morning, another bulb is gone. The next morning, you find yourself standing shoulder to shoulder with other gardeners at the break of dawn, lined up like tulips in one of the symmetrical flower beds. You're not entirely sure why you're being assembled. None of you ever are. But the Babostink walks slowly before the line, pausing here and there to glance at a smudge on a robe, a dirt-stained cuff, a stray petal clinging to someone's turban. Then he speaks. Today, the guild will be reviewed. You're not sure what that means until two black, robed men appear behind him. Guild inspectors. Wonderful. The Ottoman Empire's gardeners aren't hobbyists. They're members of a meticulously organized guild, a brotherhood that answers not just to palace whims, but to ancient rituals and unwritten codes. Entry isn't granted by enthusiasm alone. You need lineage, sponsorship, or, in your case, a serious knack for staying quiet when others panic. You remember your initiation. Not a hazing exactly, more of a ritual endurance test. You were handed a spade, a blindfold, and led to a part of the garden you'd never seen before. There, you were told to dig until you found something worth knowing. Took you 5 hours and a broken fingernail, but eventually your spade hit a buried wooden box. Inside, a tulip bulb, wrapped in silk, tied with a string of beads that spelled out, when held to the light, a date. That date, you later learned, was the day a former gardener turned traitor disappeared. Or bloomed, depending on how you read palace euphemisms. Within the guild, there are ranks. At the bottom, the dirt turners. Above them, the pruners, the water bearers, the bulb keepers. And at the highest rung, the whispering stewards. Those entrusted with tulips so rare, they don't even bloom publicly. These flowers live hidden behind lattice doors, seen only by the Sultan and his most intimate circle. You're not there yet, but you've seen one, once. A flicker of deep violet in the moonlight, behind frosted glass. Historians still debate the exact structure of the gardener corpse, whether it mirrored the janissary ranks or developed independently. But the hierarchy is real, and breaking its rules is a fast track to fertilizer. Your guildmaster, a stooped man with eyebrows like moss, covered arches, pulls you aside after roll call. He doesn't speak directly, he never does, but instead hands you a walnut shell filled with dried rosy hips. 3 rosy hips, that's a message. You've been selected for career duty. You follow the chain of signs across the garden, a white tulip near the orange grove, a broken stem at the fountain, and finally, a gardener's glove nailed discreetly to the door of the compost shed. Inside, a package awaits you. Small, wrapped in oilcloth, tied with twine. No note. No explanation. You're to deliver it to the outer quarters, near the pastry kitchens. Which, of course, seems suspiciously unrelated to horticulture. So you carry it, palms sweating, trying not to think of the rumors that these packages sometimes explode, or worse, contain damning evidence that traps the courier. In the shadow of the pastry ovens, you find your contact. A boy no older than 16, chewing cardamom seeds and wearing a cook's apron. He doesn't speak. Just swaps your package for a tulip. A real one. Pale pink, the tips dyed blue. A hybrid not officially registered. You turn to leave, but he stops you with a whisper. Next time, follow the cypress road. You nod like that means something. Back in the greenhouse, the guild is abuzz. Not with chatter, they'd never, but with more subtle signs. More guards on patrol, fewer bulbs in the open, and one particularly loud silence surrounding the Baf Bostinka's missing ledger, which no one is supposed to know about. You do, only because Furhat once pointed to it and muttered, "He writes better with flowers." Later that week, you're summoned again, this time to the Tulip Pavilion, a rare honor and a potential threat. The pavilion is a domed sanctuary near the Bosphorus shore, where the Sultan's favorites host garden parties thick with sherbet, poetry, and passive-aggressive compliments. You're there to arrange tulips, or so you think. But as you enter, two officials flank you and lead you through the side corridor, one that dips beneath the marble floor. You've never been here before. The underground chamber smells of whetstone and beeswax. A single table holds a vase. One tulip, dark red, almost black. Recognize it? One man asks. You don't. But it's close to something you saw in Furhat's sketchbook. You nod slowly. Good, says the second man. Then you'll know why we can't let it leave the palace. And just like that, you've been drafted into a more secretive order. A splinter of the guild concerned not with beauty, but with containment. Not every tulip is meant to be seen. Some were bred for silence. You learn about the archive roots, a rumored set of bulbs that, when planted under certain conditions, open not into flowers but encrypted pollen patterns, visible only through a specific kind of smoked glass. You think this is nonsense, until you see one. One night, sweeping out the seed room, you stumble across a misplaced pane of darkened glass. You lift it over a tulip left blooming in the corner, and there it is, a series of lines in the pollen. Not random, structured, repeating. The guild is older than you thought. Older than the palace. Possibly older than tulips themselves, if the more poetic gardeners are to be believed. You still dig holes. Still water beds. But every tulip now feels like a question you're afraid to ask. Nightfall brings a kind of slow panic to the compost pits. You're kneeling beside a mound of melon rinds and crushed eggplant skins when you hear it. Two voices, hushed but urgent, threading through the air, just beyond the hedge. You still your hands, listening through the steam, rising off the decaying produce. Shipments delayed, says one. They're watching the canal routes now. They won't wait, replies the other. The Dutchman said this week or it's off. He's already sent the clove pods. Clove pods. That again. You freeze, one knee deep in soggy pistachio shells. You don't dare peek around the hedge, but you commit the voices to memory. One scratchy like sandpaper, the other smooth and too slow, like syrup hiding something bitter. In the morning, you report nothing. Because that's how you survive in this garden. You bury more than compost here. Still, the words gnaw at you as you spread loam beneath the almond trees. It's not the theft that bothers you. It's how casual it sounded. Like trading bulbs under the moonlight was no more serious than swapping lemons. Yet the tulips these men speak of aren't mere trinkets. Some of the empire's most important documents. confessions, diplomatic warnings, blackmail, have been known to travel inside sealed tulip bulbs, hollowed delicately with a hot needle, packed, and resealed with wax. You've never seen one. But you've heard the term whispered among senior gardeners, Lael Carusu, the withered tulip. A career disguised as decay. Later that day, while trimming the lavender border, you find a bulb dropped in the soil, not planted, not marked. Just half buried like someone panicked. You dig it out, it's warm, which is strange. Bulbs shouldn't be warm. That usually means rot or something inside. You carry it in your sleeve until the greenhouse is clear. Alone, you work delicately, using a curved blade and the patience of a monk. Inside the bulb, no surprise, it's hollow. And tucked within, a miniature scroll. You unroll it. The pistachio crate leaves on Thursday. Mark the lavender. That's not just information. That's a command. Someone is smuggling bulbs out in pistachio shipments, and lavender patches are being used as the drop point. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman Tulip Espionage network was centrally organized or just an overlapping mess of bribes and botany. But when you look at this scroll, with its precise hand and waxy edges, you realize someone is orchestrating things from the shadows. And maybe Furhat was just one petal in a much larger bloom. You debate telling the bad boasting. But when you catch a glimpse of him later in the afternoon, he's in discussion with the very same pastry kitchen boy who handed you that hybrid tulip. Something about the angle of their shoulders tells you this goes higher than you can reach. Instead, you visit the compost pit again that night. This time, on purpose. The pit smells worse under moonlight, sweet, sickly. But you've come prepared with gloves, a torch, and the patience to sift through things no one else dares touch. You find it, quickly. A sealed jar, tucked deep among the onion peels. Inside, a bulb. Tagged with wax stamped with a European seal. You don't recognize it. But you know what it means. The next day, things accelerate. A group of Dutch botanists arrive for an audience with the Sultan. They're shown the ceremonial gardens, the fruit orchards, even the koi ponds, but not the tulip vault. That area is restricted, kept behind 3 locked doors and 2 aging eunuchs who are more muscle than they look. Still, one of the Dutchmen lingers near the iris beds longer than he should. You're nearby, pretending to prune. He kneels, scratches something into the soil with a stick, then pats it over like a child burying a secret. You wait until the delegation moves on. Then you check the spot, 3 letters, FV and a symbol like a windmill. You rush back to the gardener's archive, the dusty alcove near the bee garden, where records are kept on wax tablets, and goat leather scrolls. You flip through logs, find it. A bulb trader from Flanders, last seen in Eddern, rumored to have vanished during a frost. Could the shipment be him, or what he smuggled? The compost is no longer just rotting food. It's a graveyard of secrets. Someone is hiding things there. Maybe someone's body. You start watching the others more carefully. Gardener shifts become opportunities for surveillance. You time their routes, note when someone spends too long near the basil. When one gardener, new, twitchy, always sweating, brings out an empty wheelbarrow and returns with it full of soil, you follow. He doesn't go to the beds. He heads for the pavilion and buries the soil under a newly planted tulip. You dig it up an hour later. Nothing. But the bulb planted there is rare. One you've only seen in sketches, a hybrid bred for endurance. The kind that can survive long transport. You realize what's happening. The tulips aren't the contraband. They're the containers. Someone is using them to move messages, gold flakes, possibly even powdered gems or ink samples. The compost pit was just the first layer. You keep your head down. But the tension coils tighter each day. Someone else knows you're looking. You find your gloves sliced, your pruning shears missing. You're given fewer tasks near the tulips and more near the thorn bushes, an unspoken punishment. Then one morning, as you pour tea by the well, a gardener you barely know slips a petal into your hand. White, curled, marked with 2 ink dots. You know what that means. They're warning you. That warning petal burns a hole in your sleeve all morning. 2 ink dots. You've seen them before. Once in Furhat's notes, beside the sketch of a tulip marked, silence comes in pairs. The meaning was unclear at the time, and no one's around to clarify it now. But you suspect it's either a plea to stop investigating, or a subtle shove to keep digging. You decide not to be subtle. At dusk, when the call to prayer melts into the low rustle of the olive trees, you sneak back to the lavender patch, the one marked in the smuggled scroll. You dig where the stems lean unnaturally, like something beneath the surface is shifting them. After a few inches of soft, loamy soil, your fingers strike something smooth. It's a sealed jar, smaller than the last one. Inside, not a bulb, but dried petals, pressed flat, layered like records in a secret floral archive. You count 7. Each petal has a faint sigil painted in waxy ink, each one different. Some are symbols: a crescent, a star, a lattice pattern that reminds you of the palace gate. The last petal bears a question mark. You're still squatting over the jar when a voice breaks the silence. You shouldn't be here. You spin around, nearly toppling into the patch. It's the twitchy gardener, the sweaty one. Only now he isn't sweating. He's calm. Too calm. He walks slowly, hands raised. Not in surrender, but in confidence. You're not part of this, he says. You're not supposed to see the roots. Which roots? You ask, rising, not sure if you should be defensive or terrified. He sighs. The ones that don't bloom. And then he walks away. Historians still argue whether tulip espionage was mainly used for statecraft, personal blackmail, or religious signaling. But the symbols on those petals, so diverse and layered, suggest something older, wider, possibly even older than the Ottoman obsession itself. Back in the gardener's dormitory, you hide the petals inside the lining of your robe. You sleep badly that night, woken by dreams of vines twisting around your ankles, pulling you into the soil. In the days that follow, a shift occurs. The gardeners speak less. Eyes linger too long. You're given only surface work, watering, sweeping, nothing involving bulbs. It's a freeze out, but your curiosity's taken root too deeply. You take to reading the gardens like a book. Each tulip bed, each herb mound becomes a paragraph in some coded diary. You notice things you didn't before. How a certain gardener always lingers beside the rosemary before dusk. How the basil leaves are trimmed into the shape of crescents when the sultan is away. You begin to understand that the tulip language isn't metaphorical, it's literal. Specific hybrids mean specific phrases. A red petal with a white ring might mean, tonight, one with 3 points. The guard is bribed. It's a language, complete with syntax. You're speaking in flowers now, or trying to. To test your theory, you plant a message of your own, a single hybrid, purple, striped, curved stem, beside the fig tree, just as you saw on an old note marked, "Truth offered." The next morning it's gone, but in its place is another bulb. Planted in haste, slightly crooked. When you dig it up, you find it hollow, again. Inside a scrap of parchment. You're too loud. Come to the cypress. You do. The cypress grove behind the rose maze is quiet, wind, hushed, and rarely patrolled. You wait until the garden clears, then make your way there under the guise of pruning the nearby vines. You find them. 3 gardeners, none in uniform, all older. One wears a sash not seen in decades, embroidered with gold leaves, the emblem of the first imperial tulip order. The man speaks first. You've opened bulbs. You nod. You've read petals. You nod again. And you haven't spoken of it. Still nodding. Then you're one of us, for now. You've stumbled upon the fraternal order of petal scribes. At least that's what they call themselves. Gardeners who act not just as caretakers of flowers, but as keepers of secrets too delicate for paper and too dangerous for speech. They tell you the real history of the tulip's imperial role, how it became a tool of silent diplomacy during wars with Persia, a signpost for internal rebellions, and a symbol of forbidden alliances between palace factions. They show you an archive, one not kept in shelves or drawers, but in the garden itself. Petal rings, shaped paths, carefully overgrown messages embedded in hedges. You ask about Furhat. They look at each other. He tried to warn someone, one says. Didn't go well. You realize this group isn't officially sanctioned. They're tolerated. Barely. An unofficial layer beneath the guild. Invisible roots. They ask you a question. Do you want to stay above ground, where things are simple? Or do you want to know how deep it goes? You hesitate. Then you ask, will I survive if I say yes? They smile. Maybe. If you learn when to bloom and when to wilt, you say yes. And just like that, you're handed a new role. Not formally. Just a subtle shift, a nod. A tulip placed on your workbench the next morning, white with a black edge. It means welcome, but keep quiet. Being accepted into the silent order feels less like a promotion and more like a carefully worded threat. From the moment that black edged tulip appears on your bench, the air around you changes. Gardeners stop chatting when you walk by. Not that they ever really chatted. And your chores shift in quiet ways. You're now assigned to beds closest to the harem walls. That's no coincidence. The harem isn't just a maze of silks and secrets. It's a gravitational force. Everything bends around it. Politics, poetry, paranoia. All of it flows toward that tiled sanctuary like rain toward a drain. And while you've never set foot inside, you're now close enough to hear the footsteps of slippers. The occasional laughter of a bored concubine, or the shriek of an oversteeped scandal. The tulips outside the harem are especially delicate. Physically, yes, but also politically. Each one's placement is carefully chosen, not just for aesthetic value, but for its message. A soft orange tulip near the baths. Affection. A wilted stem near the lattice windows. Dismissal. A black tulip, slightly crushed, facing east. That means war. One afternoon, while trimming near the pomegranate trees, you spot a small bundle tucked beneath the roots. A handkerchief, embroidered in silver thread with a symbol you now recognize from the petal scribes. Two interlocking tulips, one upside down. You open it to find dried petals pressed inside. An arrangement of colors and shapes that form a phrase in the floral lexicon. He listens through the drains. A warning. But from whom? A concubine. A eunuch with a hobby for espionage. You look up to see a curtain flutter. A face vanishes behind it. That night, you return to the petal scribes under the cypress trees. They're already waiting, sipping spiced tea from clay cups, their fingers yellowed by saffron and ink. Concubines have long been part of the network, one says. Some out of loyalty, others out of boredom. Another adds, a petal is a powerful thing in a place where letters are intercepted and speech is watched. You ask, cautiously, about the meaning of the upside-down tulip symbol. Death, the eldest says, calmly, or inversion, or both, depends on where it's planted. You ask if it means someone in the harem is spying on them, or for them. They exchange glances. Then one replies, maybe it means someone's listening who shouldn't be. The next morning, you begin noticing changes in the floral messages left outside the harem. A cluster of yellow tulips, wilted early, is replaced with a fresh batch. But they're pointed slightly northeast now, toward the Grand Vizier's quarters. That's not coincidence. Then there's the rose bush incident. A particularly prized white rose bush, known to be the Valide Sultan's favorite, is found uprooted. No one saw it happen. No tool marks. Just missing. Like it walked away. In its place, someone has planted a tulip. Not just any tulip. One of the ghost hybrids, pale purple with a starburst black center. A type only grown in deep storage. You've only seen its petals in sketches. It's called Gis Kalbi. Heard of the night. It means he knows. You don't sleep that night. By the following week, tensions in the palace are palpable. The eunuchs move like cats on edge. The concubines peer longer through the latticed windows. The guards patrol the garden, not with their usual boredom, but with sharp glances and firmer grips on their scimitars. You're pruning near the central pond when one of the petal scribes slips a message into your palm. No words, just a petal soaked in rose water, slightly torn at one edge. Prepare? He mouths. For what? Then the summons comes. You're called to assist with a floral offering in the Sultan's chamber. That hasn't happened in months. Usually, a trusted elder gardener does it. Someone with clean nails and a reputation for discretion. But now, it's you. You bathe. Dress in your cleanest robe. Carry the tulip arrangement. 3 black, 2 gold, 1 white, on a silver tray. Inside the chamber, incense curls lazily from golden braziers. The Sultan isn't present. But a few of his advisors are, including one you recognize from a quiet argument you witnessed weeks ago behind the fig trees. He stares too long at the flowers. You set them down. You arrange these yourself? He asks. You nod. He examines them like a detective eyeing clues. This one, he says, pointing to a gold tulip with red streaks, is rare. You nod again. Tell me, he says. Do the gardens whisper secrets to you? You freeze? Then, only when the compost isn't listening, he laughs or pretends to. Good answer. You leave as quickly as decorum allows. Back in the greenhouse, your workbench has changed. A new pair of shears. A note carved into the wood, stay in bloom or be trimmed. You don't know who left it, but you suspect someone in the Sultan's chamber didn't find your arrangement accidental. You didn't choose the gold tulip with red streaks. Someone else placed it among the black and white. It means crown and danger. You begin to suspect the tulips are being used to warn the Sultan or deceive him, and you're the delivery boy now. The next morning, a pigeon arrives at the palace with a tiny scroll tied to its leg. Not entirely unusual, except this one's delivered directly to the gardener's shed, not the scribe's tower. That's not protocol. The message is brief. Edern's beds have gone quiet. Send eyes, not petals. You've never been to Edern, but every gardener knows of it. The old capital, tucked near the borders, with gardens said to be even more elegant than Tokapi's. Tulips were first cultivated there under imperial commission, and many of the most treasured bulbs trace their lineages to those lush riverbanks. The petal scribes give you your assignment without ceremony. A small satchel of tools, a folded map stained with tea, and 1 tulip pressed flat between pages. Deep orange, its tip bruised. That one. Your guide says quietly, only blooms when someone's hiding something. So off you go, bundled into a covered cart under the guise of delivering new bulb stalks. The road is bumpy, the horse is sullen, and your only companion is a quiet driver who smells like cloves and answers no questions. You spend most of the journey watching the tulip shift slightly in the parchment folds, like it knows something you don't. Edern greets you with a thin drizzle and a garden that looks off. The symmetry is too perfect. The bed's too clean. Like someone tidied everything in a panic. You're welcomed by the local gardener, an older woman with bark, like hands, and a sharp stare. She introduces herself as Layla. You don't give your real name. You both know the rules. You're here to investigate a lack of bloom activity. But that's just code. The real issue. Bulbs have stopped arriving. Petal messages have dried up. And one of the gardeners was recently transferred in the dead of night. Layla shows you the hothouse first. Rows of soil trays, each labeled, but with no bulbs, just tags. She says, records remain, but the bulbs are gone, stolen. She shakes her head. Too neat, too quiet, like someone erased them. You spend hours combing through the beds, lifting soil gently, checking for signs of tampering. At one far end, under a vine-covered trellis, you find a tulip growing out of season. That's suspicious enough, but the flower itself is even stranger, split down the middle in color. Half red, half yellow. That's a hybrid only grown in controlled conditions. You pluck it carefully. Tucked inside the base is a sliver of cloth. Silk. green with gold trim, palace colors. You ask Layla about it. Her face tightens. We haven't had visitors from the capital in 3 weeks. Not officially. That evening, while supposedly updating bulb charts, you explore the gardener's shed. In the back, behind old seed catalogs and dried herbs, you find a set of pressed flowers glued to a parchment, each one marked with a different name pigeon. Root, mirror fog, gate, it's a code key. The Padal scribes use similar ones, but this one's been adapted, changed. Historians still argue whether Edern's tulip codes were developed independently or were experimental systems sent from Topkapi. Some claim the Edern garden was a prototype for the entire petal network. If that's true, then someone's sabotaging the prototype. That night, you sneak into the records vault. Layla, accidentally, forgets to lock it. Inside are dozens of ledgers, some going back decades. You open the most recent one and find what you're looking for. In the bulb transfer section, several entries have been scratched out, not erased, not removed, just violently struck through. As if to say, yes, this happened. And no, you're not allowed to know more. The missing bulbs, they all share one code, B13. You check the hybrid index. That code belongs to a variant known as Whisper Flame. You've never seen one in person. Few have. It's rumored to change color based on soil pH. Also rumored to be favored by rebel informants. The next day, you track down the plot listed for B13. It's empty, except for a single tulip leaf pressed flat into the soil. Just the leaf. That's a sign. A tulip that never bloomed. You sit back on your heels, breathing in the damp smell of leaf mold and betrayal. Later that day, a visitor arrives. Not a gardener. Not a palace official. A eunuch. You recognize him. He once served near the Spice Terrace in Topkapi. Now, here he is in Edern, claiming to be just passing through. En route to deliver saffron to the mosque kitchens. He doesn't make eye contact. Layla leans close as he walks away and mutters, "That one's got cleaner hands than a newborn chick." Never touched soil in his life. You suspect the eunuch is here to shut things down, quietly. To bleach the beds, so to speak. That night, you plan a message using the orange tulip with the bruised tip right in the central bed. The message is simply, still breathing, still watching. In the morning, in its place, a black feather from a pigeon, which means message received. But stop. The Padal scribes have heard you, but they don't want you digging further. You tell Layla. She smiles faintly. Then we dig deeper. The trial isn't official. There's no courtroom, no judge's bench, no formal charges read aloud. Instead, it takes place under the largest fig tree in the Edern garden, where shade falls in quiet patterns, and the air smells of sap and suspicion. You're summoned just after dawn. A messenger leaves a tulip on your workbench. White, with a slit down the middle. It means attend quietly. Speak only when questioned. When you arrive, the scene is already set. A circle of senior gardeners, robes pressed, hands folded, expressions unreadable. In the center, the eunuch from Topkapi, the one with suspiciously clean hands. The accused. He stands calmly, palms up, the edges of his robe suspiciously damp. Someone has placed a tulip bulb on a pedestal beside him. It's a ceremonial gesture, symbolic of the truth buried deep, waiting to bloom. No one speaks for a long time. Then Layla steps forward. You are here because petals vanished. The eunuch doesn't blink. I deliver spices. I do not garden. Yet you walk where bulbs vanish. And your name appears in our ledgers. She says, holding up an old entry with his signature beside a shipment of Whisper flame bulbs. Oh, would a spice courier handle rare tulips? Historians still argue whether eunuchs were deeply involved in tulip espionage or merely tools moved about the chessboard. Some claim they were the true architects of the petal codes, leveraging their unique position between the palace's inner and outer worlds. Others say they were merely scapegoats. The eunuch says nothing, so the gardeners begin to list their findings: the missing bulbs, the scratch marks in the soil, the altered petal codes discovered in the archive, each one like a pruning snip aimed at a lie. Finally, they produced the black feather you found yesterday. This, says the eldest gardener, was not from the local pigeons. The eunuch finally speaks. You accuse me of theft, but the real question is, who gains from blaming me? The silence that follows is thick as resin. Then Layla places something beside the tulip bulb, a tiny scroll, no bigger than a thumbnail. It's sealed in wax shaped like a crescent moon. A code used only by the palace's inner scribe network. I found this inside one of the missing bulbs, she says. And it bears your seal? The eunuch's jaw tightens. I never planted that bulb, he says. But someone wanted you to find it. You realize what's happening. This isn't a trial, it's a pruning. They're not here to determine innocence or guilt. They're here to remove instability. You step forward against your better judgment. What if he's telling the truth? Every face turns to you. You continue. He may have carried messages, but so have many of us. And this code, it's older, outdated, like someone wanted to frame him using a signature that no longer matches the real ones. Layla watches you for a long moment, then nods slowly. You suggest a ghost gardener. She asks, that's an old term. One that refers to someone operating outside the guild, outside the scribes, someone from a forgotten faction or a rogue element. Once loyal, now rogue. A gardener who no longer blooms. I suggest someone wants us looking in the wrong bed, you reply. The circle dissolves. Quietly, the eunuch is released, escorted back to the spice carts under close watch, but not punished. Not yet. That evening, as you sit trimming deadheads near the olive walk, Layla joins you. You're not wrong, she says, but you've made yourself noticeable. That's not comfort, that's a forecast. Over the next few days, you notice more activity around the edges of the garden. New faces in old robes. Gardeners who ask too many questions, or none at all. Beds are shifted. Patterns and petal codes change, slightly, but enough to signal a rewrite of protocol. You suspect the ghost gardener theory isn't just possible. It's active. Then, late one night, as the moon glows pale and sour over Eddern, you catch movement near the old well. You follow, silent as a beetle, heart pounding like a tabor drum. The figure moves quickly, slipping behind the greenhouse. You wait, then follow. What you find stops your breath. Ferhat, alive. He's older, grayer, thinner, but unmistakable. He looks at you like he never left. He holds a tulip bulb between thumb and forefinger, inspecting it in the moonlight. You're digging in the wrong direction, he says. You whisper his name. He smiles. Still watching, I see. Everyone thinks you're dead. They let them think that. He replies. Needed someone to vanish when the bulbs started going missing. But I wasn't the thief. I was the alarm. You shake your head, stunned. He hands you the bulb. It's warm. They're not just transporting messages anymore, he says. They're altering them. Changing the codes mid-route. Someone's hijacking the petal network. You ask who. He hesitates. Not sure. But they're not gardeners, and they don't care what blooms. He vanishes before sunrise. In the morning, you find a new flower planted where he stood. A hybrid you've never seen before, and its petals point west. You stare at the new tulip. Its petals an eerie blend of sea green and ivory. The tips tinged with gray like old ash. It's not in any of the gardener records or petal scribe codices. A ghost hybrid, planted overnight, pointing west. West, where the cypress grove lines the edge of the garden like sentinels, tall and rigid and always watching. The place where secrets come to settle, and sometimes to rot. You visit the cypress grove at dusk, when the light slants low and gold, and the world seems wrapped in whispers. The grove has always been a quiet place. Cool, dry, a refuge for those too tired or too frightened to keep digging. But tonight, it hums. You follow the tulips. Yes, there are tulips here, planted deep beneath the trees, half in shade, their colors muted like bruises. These aren't decorative. They're not even part of the gardener's map. They're surveillance. Tulip espionage in its most literal form. Some tulips here are bred to open only at night, revealing inner markings visible only under moonlight. Others close tightly when approached by heat. A few, if the stories are true, will change orientation if exposed to particular perfumes. You walk the grove slowly, eyes scanning the patterns. Tulips lean at angles like clock hands. You begin to read them. First danger. Then spy among roots. Then, farther in, trust the fungus. That one makes you stop. You kneel near the indicated tulip and dig gently around its base. The soil is rich, damp, and riddled with a faint network of white threads. Mycelium. The mushrooms in the grove aren't just natural. They're cultivated. A hidden communication line. Historians still argue whether the Ottomans understood fungal communication, but recent studies suggest gardeners might have used certain mycelium networks to transfer moisture cues, or even chemical signals, between beds. Here, that theory appears weaponized. You dig deeper. Wrapped around the base of a fungal root is a bulb, not yet sprouted, but clearly sealed in wax. You extract it carefully. Later, in your room, under low candlelight, you open it. Inside is not a message, it's a map. A delicate ink drawing of the garden, but not as it is, as it was. Overlaid with older paths, now overgrown, bed placements long forgotten, tulip lines that no longer bloom, and a mark in the northwest corner, a crescent beside a black petal, the symbol for betrayal and burial. You wait until midnight. With the map and a quiet shovel, you follow the trail across the old garden beds, stepping over thyme and rosemary, ducking beneath grapevines that hang like lazy guards. At the marked point, the earth is slightly raised, too regular to be natural. You dig. A few inches down, your shovel strikes wood. A box. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lies a sheaf of tulip petals, pressed, catalogued, and annotated in a hand you recognize. Fur hats. But there's more. A tiny vial of powder. Dark, oily, scentless, and a note used once to kill a prince. Still effective. You sit back, the night buzzing with cicadas and tension. This isn't espionage anymore. It's assassination. You hide the box, recover the ground, and return through the cypress grove. On your way back, you find footprints, fresh, light, deliberately placed. Someone else was watching. The next day, the Bab Bostink arrives unexpectedly in Edirne. He doesn't speak to the gardeners. He meets only with Layla, then with the eunuch, then, finally, with you. You're summoned to the central pavilion. It's quiet, clean, too tidy. He doesn't offer you a seat. We've seen the tulip, he says. You know which one he means. The sea-green hybrid. The one Furhat planted. The warning. He walks slowly around the room, inspecting the flower arrangements like they're lying to him. You're loyal, he says, but careless. He places a small pouch on the table. Inside are crushed petals. I want the original, he says. You blink. What original? The flower. You found it. You kept it. I want it. You realize then he's not part of the petal scribes. He's above them, or around them. You play dumb. He smiles. If you don't give it to me, I'll assume you've joined the roots. The roots. The whispered name for rogue elements. Ghost gardeners. Fungal messengers. Those who operate outside guild approval. I'm just a gardener. You reply. He laughs softly. We're all just gardeners. Until the tulips start whispering. He leaves without another word. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you sit by the tulip, now planted in a pot in your quarters. It hasn't bloomed further. It just waits. At dawn, a pigeon lands on your sill. Tied to its leg, a tulip seed. No note, just the seed. You know what it means. Plant it, and follow what grows. You plant the seed just before sunrise, pressing it gently into a pot of rich soil near your sleeping quarters. The act feels ceremonial, like lighting a fuse. You water it lightly, whisper something. Why not? And leave it by the window where the morning sun fingers in like lazy honey. Tulip seeds take years to grow, but you're not planning for a flower. You're planning for a sign. The day proceeds with eerie normalcy. You trim hedges, rotate compost, catalog bulbs, but every movement feels staged, like the garden itself is holding its breath. Then, disaster. A shriek echoes from the greenhouse. You drop your tools and run, followed by a swirl of other gardeners. Inside, the air is chaos. A pane of the western glass has cracked. Spider, webbed into glinting fissures, and beneath it, 3 tulip beds lie flattened, petals crushed like spilled wine. Someone breached the imperial greenhouse, which, if you're not familiar, is like someone walking into the crown vault and throwing the jewels on the floor. You're ordered out. The Bofbostink arrives within minutes, his robes flapping like angry curtains, followed by guards who clearly weren't stationed properly. That's when you see them. Foreigners. 3 of them. Tall, pale, speaking in low tones, one holding a folded paper marked with a wax seals, an orange lion, rampant. Dutch? Historians agree that by the early 18th century, Dutch tulip mania reached such fevered heights that foreign horticulturists began infiltrating Ottoman networks under botanical study. What's debated is how much espionage was attached to these so-called flower lovers. You're inclined to believe a lot. The 3 foreigners are ushered away, but not before one of them glances at the broken glass, then at you. His eyes linger, just a heartbeat too long. You stay behind to help assess the damage. The 3 tulip varieties destroyed were rare hybrid Sedef, Wild Easy, Guz Karan, and a third without name, just a number, B14. You recognize B14. It was the last bulb Ferhat sketched in his ledger. It's gone now. Crushed. Later that night, as moonlight smears silver across your floorboards, you inspect your seed pot. Nothing yet. But the soil is damp in a strange pattern, one side darker than the other. You lean closer. The shape is intentional. A crescent. You stare. The seed hasn't sprouted, but already it speaks. The following day, the petal scribes reconvene, not in the grove. In the bathhouse ruins. A cold, damp place where no one listens and echoes carry secrets into stone. You show them the pot. They nod gravely. A mimic seed. One murmurs. It doesn't bloom. It signals. You ask what it means. It's asking where your loyalties lie. You tell them about the Dutch, about the cracked glass, about B14. Their expressions shift. You're in deeper than we thought, Layla says. You've become the vessel. Vessel, a role used sparingly, usually to transport something so vital that not even the scribes trust each other. A vessel is marked not by what they know, but by what they carry unknowingly. You feel cold. They show you a drawing, crude, rushed, but detailed. It's the Dutchman's face, the one who looked too long. He was seen in Bursa. Someone says, same method, glass broken, hybrid stolen. Then silence. You ask what B14 contained. The scribes hesitate. It wasn't just a flower. One finally says, it was an index, a living map. You blink. A map to what? To the vault. There are rumors, always have been, about a tulip vault beneath Topkapi, a cold, stone chamber where the rarest bulbs are kept. Not just for their beauty, but for what they carry. Sealed messages inks that change under moonlight, scrolls that unravel only with certain petal oils. You ask why someone would want it. They answer with a single word. Control. Whoever controls the vault doesn't just own the tulips. They own the language of the petals, the codes, the history, the future. You return to your quarters that night with trembling hands. The pot remains unchanged, but someone has left something beside it. A single black tulip, fresh. It wasn't there an hour ago. You touch it carefully. The petals feel warm. Attached is a ribbon, not silk, not cotton, something coarser. You unroll it. Just one phrase inked there. We've already dug beneath you. You sit for a long time, staring at the soil, wondering what roots are wrapping around your name right now. It starts with a whisper at breakfast. Amsterdam is wilting. You barely catch the words. 2 gardeners, hunched over dates and flatbread, speaking in tones low enough to blend with the morning wind. You act like you didn't hear, but your mind races. By mid-morning, The whispers swell into rumors. The Dutch are panicking. Tulip bulbs that once fetched fortunes are now worthless. The hysteria has snapped. Tulipomania has collapsed. You'd think this would be good news. But here, it only adds pressure. Because when the West sneezes, the Ottomans brace for a storm. Tulips have long been a cultural export, not just an aesthetic one. The Dutch obsession with Ottoman hybrids created a dangerous market. One not just fueled by trade, but by secrets hidden in petals. And now, as values plummet in Europe, desperate collectors and diplomats are making bold moves to preserve what power they've bought by any means necessary. Which is why, 3 days after the greenhouse breach, a ship docks in Istanbul bearing crates labeled dried cloves and ink stones. One crate, however, is mislabeled. It simply says G's Boss EC Autumn Garden. And inside, not cloves, not stones, tulip bulbs. From Edirne, you're summoned back to Topkapi immediately. The journey is quiet, long. You share the cart with 3 crates of bulbs, some of which you're fairly certain were meant to stay buried. You recognize the wax seals a purple swirl, a fractured rose, a triangle inside a crescent, all symbols once used by the piddle scribes to denote hybrids too sensitive for public cultivation. Someone is digging up the archive. Back in the palace, the garden seems different, like it aged while you were gone. The lavender's more brittle, the rose bushes trimmed too tightly. Even the cats seem less lazy. You're welcomed coldly. Your workbench has been cleaned. Too clean, your old tools gone. Replaced with a single trowel and a sealed envelope. Inside, a note, your bloom is fading. Water wisely, it's unsigned. But the handwriting, it's fur hats. You follow the signs. Tulip beds planted slightly out of season. Patches of forget-me, knots that lean north toward the kitchens. A cluster of tulips arranged in a trinary pattern, meaning meeting at third bell. You slip into the spice cellar just before the bells ring, where 3 figures are already waiting. 2 scribes, and 1 unexpected guest, the Dutch botanist. He doesn't flinch at your arrival, just nods. I thought it was time we spoke plainly, he says. You keep your hands at your sides. You broke the greenhouse, you say. He smiles. We opened it. Then, to your horror, one of the scribes nods in agreement. What you don't understand, the Dutchman continues, is that this isn't about flowers. It's about language. Control it, and you control memory. He produces a scroll from his coat. It unfurls with a soft papery sigh. It's a tulip lexicon, one you've seen only in whispers, the original translation key used during the earliest days of Ottoman botanical messaging. We're not here to destroy your gardens, he says. We're here to rewrite them. Historians still argue whether European involvement in tulip espionage was strategic or opportunistic. But looking at this man, you see clarity. He isn't interested in beauty. He's interested in leverage. You ask, why now? He shrugs. Because chaos is fertile soil. He leaves the scroll with the scribes and disappears into the labyrinth of the cellar. You turn on them. You're helping him. One shakes his head. Not helping. Aligning. The vault. You begin. We know. The other says, which terrifies you more than anything. You return to the garden in a daze. The tulips wave gently in the breeze, like nothing's happened. But you know now that each bed is a battlefield, each petal a soldier. That night, you're woken by scratching at your door. A bundle. Inside, 3 tulips, 1 red, 1 black, 1 pale green. The combination is clear. They know your role. Run. You gather your things. Quickly. Quietly. You don't flee the palace. You flee into it. Into the orchard. The one where disfavored gardeners go to age in obscurity. You hide among gnarled fig trees and overgrown melon vines. The soil here is heavy, the air warm and sleepy. But it's safe. For now. And as the moon rises high, you plant your mimic seed in the orchard's heart. You don't know what will bloom. But you know who'll be watching. Mornings in the orchard are quieter. Not peace, just silence with sharper edges. The fig trees are overripe, their sweet decay drawing bees, and the occasional lizard. You've become something between caretaker and fugitive, pruning in the shadows, waiting for something to grow from that mimic seed you buried like a hope. It doesn't sprout. But something else does. A cluster of wild tulips, thin, stemmed and pale as milk, appear just beyond the orchard wall, where no one's planted anything in years. Their arrangement is too clean, too intentional. A ring. At the center, a single bloom facing downward. You recognize the message instantly. Code compromised. Watch for break. Back in the main palace gardens, the petal scribes are shifting their strategies. You overhear things, through orchard deliveries and the occasional fig basket exchange. They're reducing the number of coded petal messages. Switching to scents, root depths, even shadow length in certain plots. The language is evolving, but the saboteur still walks the beds, and you begin to fear it might be you. Not on purpose, but someone is using your work, your rotes, your signature in the garden's layout. You notice it first in the compost patterns. Your signature spirals duplicated too perfectly. Then in the alignment of bulb baskets on your abandoned workbench. They're impersonating you, and badly. You head to the greenhouse to confirm it. At night, when only the cats patrol the corridors, what you find makes your stomach sink. In the center of the tulip vault, yes, the rumored vault is real, beneath the greenhouse's western wing. A bed of tulips you never planted blooms in your signature style. Precise spacing, curved rows, alternating color cadence. You didn't do this, but someone wants it to look like you did. There's one message, spelled out in petal codes, across the roused graft of trust broken. The tulips are hybrids, but the kind banned decades ago. Not for beauty, for volatility. They're known to alter soil chemistry, affecting nearby bulbs unpredictably. A metaphor made real. Historians still argue whether these tulip graft betrayals were botanical accidents or strategic sabotage. But this one, it's deliberate. You dig up one bulb. It's empty. Just wax and ash inside. You return to the orchard that night and find the mimic seed you planted has shifted slightly. Not grown, just moved. The soil around it disturbed in a perfect circle, as if someone dug it up and replaced it precisely. You're not just being impersonated, you're being shadowed. Later, at the fig trees, you meet someone unexpected for hat. Again, he's barefoot this time, soil caked under his nails, his robe torn and faded. They're turning your garden against you, he says simply. I know. They're planting words you didn't speak. You ask him what to do. He hands you a single petal, not fresh. Dried. Brittle. It's black with faint gold veins. That's the last warning the scribes ever issued to the palace, he says. Before the last vault breach. Before silence fell for a year. You ask if they'll believe you're not the traitor. Fur Hat looks tired. They might not need to. The next day, you're summoned. Not by letter, or tulip, or whisper. By guards. Straight to the Bab-Bostanka's chamber. He doesn't scowl. That's the worst part. He smiles. I understand you've been active, quietly. You nod, and that your influence on the tulip beds is substantial. Again, you nod. Then you'll forgive me, he says. If I ask for a small test, he hands you a scroll. A coded tulip map. You're to plant a bed in a specific pattern, in the ceremonial gardens, for the visiting Persian emissary. It must bloom exactly, he says. Failure would be noticed. The message encoded in the pattern is subtle trust is possible again. You realize what he's asking. He's either testing you or making you complicit. If you do this, you help rebuild a code that's been hijacked. If you refuse, you mark yourself as broken trust. That night you sit in the orchard, tulip map in your lap, hands shaking. The mimic seed still hasn't grown, but when you lean in, the soil smells faintly of ink. Someone or something is still writing. You decide to plant the bed. Exactly. But with one twist. You invert two tulips at the far end. An ancient petal trick meaning double. Read me. If they notice, they'll know you're aware. If they don't, well, Then betrayal may already be rooted too deep. They assign you a new uniform. Neat, stiff, freshly dyed in the deep green reserved for trusted senior gardeners. It doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like bait. You wear it anyway. Because now you're no longer lurking in the fig-shadowed orchard. You're front and center. The ceremonial garden has been swept, polished, and perfumed within an inch of its life, and you're in charge of arranging the tulip bed that may, or may not, signal an empire's shifting loyalty. You plant carefully. The bulbs slide into place like chess pieces, each one a potential move, red striped with gold at the center, then a ring of plain yellow, then the whisper, soft lilac hybrids at the edge. The two inverted bulbs, your message, go in last. Subtle, nearly unnoticeable, unless someone knows to look. The Persian emissary arrives just before sunset, robes rippling like sails, eyes sharp as pruning shears. He walks the garden with the bath boasting, stopping exactly at the tulip bed. He studies it, pauses at the edge, leans closer. Then he straightens, nods once, and murmurs something you don't hear. He saw it, and he said nothing. Later that night, a tulip is left at your door. A double bloom, rare, unstable, bred only in experimental beds. Its meaning is old, nearly forgotten. Speak once, then disappear. You know it's time. So you go to the one place no one dares to plant anymore. The abandoned orchard past the aqueduct ruins. The place where old tulips were once exiled when they lost their bloom or gained too much personality. The soil there is silty dry. But you bring water, you bring compost. You bring a bulb. Not the mimic seed. That's already served its purpose. This bulb is from the vault. One of the banned hybrids, pale and glistening, with a root system that curls like a question. You dig in silence, plant in silence. Then, as you tamp the soil, a voice behind you says, "You shouldn't be here." You don't jump. You recognize the voice. Ferhat. Again. Always when the earth is soft and the moon is bold. You keep showing up. You mutter, "I'm part of the root system now." He replies with a smile. He hands you a petal. This one's inked. A proper message. The scroll is false. You stare at him. The Dutchman's lexicon. You ask. He nods. It's a plant. Meant to confuse. Rearranged meanings. Tilted codes. The Sultan's been reading betrayal in bouquets, where only greetings were planted. You remember the ceremonial message of trust is possible again, and realize if the Sultan's reading it with the wrong lexicon, he might think it says, "Stand down. You are not needed." You look at Ferhat. Why would they want the Sultan to feel obsolete? Because then others bloom. He replies. The next day, your garden is too quiet. You prune rosemary, listen to bees, avoid eye contact. Then a message arrives, not by petal, not by pigeon, by decree. You are reassigned, not punished, not imprisoned, promoted, to the orchards of Anatolia. The text reads like a gift. You read it like a warning. Everyone knows what happens in Anatolia. It's where gardeners go to fade, where tulips are forgotten and only wheat grows. A place with no codes, no petals, just dirt and distance. You prepare to leave that night. Your belongings are few. Mostly petals you've pressed, scrolls you've hidden, memories you haven't yet buried. As you pack, you find a note in your satchel. A scrap of parchment tucked into the lining. It reads, "The scroll is false." But the soil remembers. No signature. But you know who it's from. You leave through the side gate. No ceremony. Just one final look at the tulip beds, glowing under moonlight like a galaxy of secrets. The road to Anatolia is long and dry. Olive groves and cracked hills. Fewer whispers here. But sometimes, when the wind shifts, you swear you hear a petal rustle with meaning. And when you arrive, there's a plot waiting for you, untouched. Barren. You kneel. Test the soil. It's good. Better than you expected. You reach into your pocket. Pull out a bulb. Not the banned one. Not the mimic. Just a plain tulip. One that blooms soft yellow. Hope-colored. You plant it. Then sit back and wait. Sometimes vanishing is the loudest message you can send. Time moves differently in Anatolia. Days unspool like wool on a spindle, slow, coarse, repetitive. You rise with the light, sleep with the stars, and speak mostly to yourself and the wind. The tulip you planted blooms after 3 weeks. It's perfect, soft yellow, wide petals center like spun honey. Not flashy, not rare, but present. And in this dusty stretch of land, that's enough. The local gardeners, few and mostly retired, ask little. You water plots, prune wild almonds, and tend to rows of wheat that don't whisper secrets, just yield bread. No petals here are coated. No one drops bulbs like messages. At least, not at first. Then, one morning, you find a tulip that wasn't planted by you. It's tucked beside the irrigation ditch, almost bashful. Its bloom a pale green you haven't seen since Edirne. A color that once meant, still watching. Next to it, a tiny clay tablet, half buried in the soil. You dig it out carefully. The script is faint, pressed by hand, not stylus. It reads vault compromised. Lexicon spread. Do not return. You sit down on the earth, dizzy. If the vault is truly breached, the petal scribes are done. Their entire network, every coded message, every petal delivered in the dark, becomes dangerous, misread, twisted, reversed. It's not just espionage anymore, it's misinformation. And you, the exile, the vessel, may now be the only person who knows which tulips still speak the old tongue. The next few weeks are strangely quiet. You begin keeping a notebook, carefully hidden, of tulip variants, natural hybrids, local species you find on morning walks. It's the first time in years you've cataloged for yourself. Then comes the dream. A field of tulips, all black. Their petals flutter not in wind, but in breath. Each one exhales a word you can't hear. At the center, a scroll, burning at one end, blooming at the other. When you wake, a red tulip sits on your windowsill, a real one. Recently cut, still dewy. You didn't put it there. You press it between your journal pages and go outside. No footprints, no note, no message. Except, of course, there is one. You just don't know how to read it yet. That day, you take a long walk through the hills, ending at a forgotten olive grove near a dried stream bed. There, you find another bulb. Just sitting, waiting, wrapped in gauze. You bring it back, plant it by the first yellow tulip. It doesn't bloom immediately, but you don't need it to. It's a promise. A week later, a traveler arrives in the village, wears a merchant's robe, carries only herbs and a single tulip bulb, wrapped in waxed cloth like contraband. He claims to be looking for garden wisdom. You pretend not to understand. He leaves the bulb behind. You plant it. At night, it glows faintly under the stars. No one else seems to notice. You begin to think you've been sent here not to fade, but to root. Then another message arrives. A pigeon, this time tired, ragged. Tied to its leg is a single petal, folded. You open it. Inside ink, faint and precise. Vault sealed. Ghosts remain. Tulip faded, garden yours. No name. Just the seal of the petal scribes. A closed tulip. Wax blackened at the tip. It means end of cycle. You walk the garden that evening slowly. Count your steps. Listen to the soil. Speak to the trees. The orchard you've built in exile has grown. Not large, not grand, but aware. Tulips now bloom in a variety not seen elsewhere. Natural hybrids, accidental cross, pollinations, tiny miracles of time and inattention. And they speak, not like before, not with secrets or threats, but in form, in presence, in bloom. The language of survival. The orchard wakes before you now. Tulips stretch before dawn, brushing mist from their petals like old cats rising from sleep. Some of them, especially the ones planted near the fig trees, tilt subtly toward your window, as if waiting for your breath on the glass. You step outside, barefoot, feeling the chill of Anatolian morning settle into your bones. The garden, once your hiding place, has become something else entirely. Not a prison, not quite a sanctuary. More like a library. A slow-blooming archive of things only you still remember how to read. By midday, you've trimmed the olive trees, turned the compost, and collected a handful of late, seasoned figs. The bees have taken to one tulip in particular. Bright orange with a black slit through its center. It wasn't supposed to bloom this year. In fact, you don't remember planting it. You kneel to inspect it. Inside its petals is a small strip of folded bark. Birch, maybe. You unfold it carefully. Ink blots and careful handwriting reveal a phrase language endures. Speak it? No signature. But the ink smells faintly of topkapi. Clove, saffron, and ash. Someone is still alive. Still writing. You spend the afternoon marking petals in your private codex, developing a newer version of the old tulip language. One that blends gesture, color, even pollination patterns. Not a return to the empire's coded past, but something gentler. Something for whoever comes next. Historians, if they ever find your notes, will argue over the purpose of your garden. A retreat? A last outpost? A harmless floral diary? They'll never guess that it was once the nerve center of the only surviving tulip code. Sometimes you think of Furhat. Wonder if he's alive somewhere in the empire, planting invisible messages in the hills above Bursa or Kayseri. You think of the Dutchman, too. Wonder if he ever stopped breaking greenhouses. Probably not. Then, one day without warning, a rider arrives. Not in uniform. Not armed. Just a boy with dust in his hair and a scroll in his hand. It reads, "The Empire will not listen, but it will remember. Send a bloom. There's a seal. The same wax tulip, blackened at the tip. You know what to do." That evening, you walk the orchard slowly, pruning with reverence. You select one tulip, a pale cream with faint silver edges. One you've been saving, though you didn't know why. You wrap it carefully. Send it back with a rider, no message. Just the bloom. Weeks pass. No reply. Then, one morning, a tulip blooms where none should. Black. Silent. Facing east. Doesn't need to say anything. You understand. As empires wilt, tulips endure. Their language persists. Quiet. Buried flowering when no one is looking. The wind picks up in the orchard. Figs rustle. Petals sigh. You close your eyes. Breathe in. Sleep will come soon. The garden will speak for you. Forever. The tulips sleep now, curled and still under a blanket of soil warmed by the day's last breath. The orchard hums softly. An old tune of leaves brushing, roots stretching, and the low, steady beat of crickets narrating a story already ending. You sit quietly beside the fig tree, the one with the crooked trunk that always leaned too far, but never fell. You lean with it. Let your weight sink. There is no rush. The moon above glows like a faded wax seal. Somewhere, a pigeon stirs in a coop, its dreams likely filled with messages it once carried, or perhaps only breadcrumbs. The empire is far away now, its domes, its whispers, its plotting. But the garden remains, each bloom a memory, each stem a sentence. The language of the tulips will not shout to be remembered. It will bloom gently, out of season, in places no one expects. Maybe someday, a child will pluck one and feel something in the color, something ancient and kind. You rest your head against your knees. Breathe deeply. The air smells of thyme, figs, and damp soil. Safe smells, old friends. The petals will close soon. You will too. And when morning comes, maybe one more tulip will bloom, not with a message, just with peace.